Hey, Browns fans, day two of our NFL Combine coverage here for BrownsDigest.com. Appreciate you guys following along all throughout the week over at BrownsDigest.com right here on the Browns Digest YouTube page. We've had you covered. We've had a bunch of different content going up throughout the week and the last couple of days, and we're excited to talk about some more stuff and react to it today because we did get a chance to hear from head coach Kevin Stefanski in classic Kevin Stefanski fashion. He didn't say a lot, but where there are some things that we will hit on. I want to start, though, Anthony, with the news that broke, really two pieces of news that broke this morning. Denzel Ward's contract was restructured, freeing up $11 million for the Browns, which, as we know, after the announcement of what the cap was going to be was revealed, $255 million. That was good news for the Browns because with their rollover cap, they were only like $7 million or so over the salary cap at that point. So this move now has them in the black. They're clear to start making some different roster moves. Now they don't have a ton of space still, but I would imagine this means I'm not even going to say imagine. This means that more restructures are coming, and the Browns are going to continue to do this. This is just kind of life and business in the NFL, and how you kind of operate between the margins when you have a very expensive roster like the Browns do.
Yeah, and when you have an owner who is willing to front cash, I mean
Yeah,
that's truthfully what it is, right? Instead of paying the salary out over the course of the season, he just gives them a bag of cash now at the front of it, and you have to have an owner willing to do that, willing to spend, and thankfully for Cleveland, the Haslam family has proven time and time again that they will open their checkbooks, whether it's for a player or whether it's for as we're going to get into, stadium renovations and things like that, they will open their checkbooks to try to make this franchise put it in a better place. So it's really good to see that Denzel
yeah.
got his contract restructured today.
Yeah, it's a really good point to bring up with the ownership. And we've talked about this before, but just the fact that not all owners are created equal, if you will. Like not all of them have the cash and the money to do what the Haslam's are doing. Because when you do what you did to Denzel Ward's contract today, which is converting base salary to signing bonus, you're basically giving that player the money right now. So the Haslam, and you're kicking the can down the road because they did add a voided year on there, but the Haslam's are willing to commit money that is going to be paid out now into later years because they feel comfortable doing that and they have the checkbook to do it. So I think that obviously speaks a lot to what this ownership's been trying to do in terms of spending to make this team better and spending on just the facilities and the teams in general. And that leads actually, it's a nice segue into the next part of the conversation I want to have, which was the other news that broke today, which was the NFLPA's second annual team report cards, which is basically the system they created last year. Players have a chance to kind of go through and they do a survey on all the amenities and the workplace environment that they're in from every single team. And it gives them a chance to basically grade out where all these teams are. The Browns came in at 23rd overall. One of the key elements on there was that they don't have a weight room right now, and their weight room is basically set up inside their field house, like on the field. But there was a note in there that the Haslam's actually got one of the better grades of the entire thing. They were a B, and part of that was that they said the players get the sense that the owners are trying to invest in the facilities and invest in the team. And that's important when you make when you mention what you just mentioned about, hey, they're paying Denzel Ward's money up front now with the signing bonus and the restructure. They're willing to do that, but they also are investing in that property, in that space with expansion and all these different things.
Yeah, no question. And Stefanski talked about it. I'm not sure if it was in the media availability or on a radio show that I was listening to, but he mentioned how important the entire Browns organization is, especially to young guys around the draft. You think of some of the draftees that we've had who've been successful, MJ Emerson, DeJuan Jones,
Yeah,
and they're talking about taking these low round picks and making them first round talents. And you don't just do that with them showing up, right? You have to have good coaches, but you also have to have great facility. You have to have great food. You have to have great workout facility. You have to have great training staff, all those things. And you see that they're trying to at least invest in that. And, they bought that land a couple weeks ago right by the airport. You don't know if that's maybe stadium land or if that's going to be a
yeah.
whole new facility, whatever it may be. You just know that, hey, it isn't for lack of trying. And it is something that it's funny when they do practice indoors and we see the clips of them throwing and you got the weights in the background. You're like, what is this? A park? But they are trying to invest in that. And it kind of showed. And it's good to see that the players are obviously aware of what's going on from the ownership level.
Yeah, and Kevin Stefanski mentioned that as well in the first press conference he had today. You know, they are investing in building a new weight room. He made that very clear. So part of the point of that study, and J.C. Treader, who obviously we know he was a former Brown, he's still the president of the NFLPA. He said like part of it is you put these grades out and we see sort of how the teams react to them. And he noted that there was a number of teams who saw that last year and took the information. They're like, hey, we're going to change immediately, and other teams didn't. So even though this is something that's a work in progress, it's clear that the Browns are working on changing at least one of those things that they were graded pretty low on. I think the other thing that caught my attention from that was just Kevin Stefanski got a B minus, which at face value wasn't the end of the world, but it is kind of funny. Like two-time NFL Coach of the Year, he's getting a B minus, and some of the stuff that the players noted was that about 30% of the players didn't think that he made the most use of their time, and that was like 29th overall, and then like they were the other
Yep.
one was like 27th or something like that, and it was about like whether or not he listens to the locker room. And I thought that was interesting because this culture was so tight knit last year. It really felt like they took on the identity of Kevin Stefanski, and it was kind of permeating throughout that building.
Mhm.
So to see that, I think it wasn't alarming. You're not concerned, but it was interesting to see that was kind of something that they noted, and he kind of talked about that as well, saying, "I have an open door policy."
Yeah. What an interesting thing, like to kind of grade your coach. You rarely see that. Obviously, this is a new system, but
Yeah,
I think back to a couple things, right? I think back to in Arizona when the Browns were playing the Cardinals, and Amari Cooper after the game was like very open about the fact that he went right to Kevin and was like, "Hey, I can get my guy in double move." And remember that out and up that Deshaun dropped, and it was like the perfect ball. And it's like, yeah, you hear stuff like that in the field or real life examples, and you're like, oh, maybe guys do he does listen to his guys or whatnot. And then
yeah,
you hear Joe Flacco at the end of the year, a guy who's been in it, who's won a Super Bowl, was in the Ravens organization for most of his career, knows what a well-run organization's like, and had nothing but glowing things to say about what's going on inside those walls from an organization standpoint. So I don't know. You take those grades kind of you want to say you take them with a grain of salt, but they do come from the players, but it is an interesting little juxtaposition you got going
yeah.
on from those results.
Yeah, you don't always know the factors that are involved, but
Yeah.
yeah, that was obviously a story that came out today, and something that the Browns are paying attention to. One quick note from that first press conference as well, maybe one of the funnier lines from
Yeah.
Kevin Stefanski today, as he was asked just about the importance of the interview process here at the NFL Combine and what you're kind of taking away from those things. And one of the things he brought up was just body language, and that's one of the things that you're reading in these interviews. And he used the term BBL, which in Brown's nomenclature, I guess, means bad body language. And he mentioned how in their quarterback room they have a BBL fine that they hand out. So
Mhm.
if you have bad body language, they fine you. He even joked that Nick Chubb is maybe the lowest fined player because he always has good body language. But I got a laugh out of the media, got a laugh out of people watching at home. I know when they heard the term BBL, and I don't know that Kevin Stefanski really knew that actually
No.
means something else.
Yeah, I don't think he did. And I remember like I had just was listening to it, just kind of listening to the press conference when it was live and just kind of at my work desk and I like heard it. I'm like, wait a second. And like had to rewind it. I'm like, what in the world did he just say? But yeah, a good laugh from pretty much everybody except for him. That's one of those where you're on the outside of the joke and you're like, what the heck's everyone laughing about?
Yeah, it was a funny one. You don't get a ton of those with Kevin Stefanski all the time, so
Mhm.
it was good to kind of get a chuckle. In the second portion, because again, he did the stand up press conference on one of the podiums behind me, and then he did kind of a sidebar with most of the local media, and he was asked more so about a couple specific topics in relation to this season, in relation to the team. I think where I want to start is he talked about the Greenbrier, something we hit on yesterday because Andrew Berry said they were going to be going back to the Greenbrier. And it's evident, as we alluded to, that one of the main goals of that process or that thought process of going back there is to, hey, it worked well last year. And he kind of said, like, you don't just say because we had a good, successful season this year, we're going to go back. But he said because the staff was great last year and we got so much work done and we were able to, have this team building exercise just
Mhm.
kind of happen naturally. We felt like it was important to go back and do it again. I think that's important to note, and it certainly feels like they're trying to start the training camp in the season kind of on that high note where they get a chance to be together and kind of do these things at the Greenbrier.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity just to build a foundation. And he mentioned that, at some point today, talking about just, hey, it just maybe it doesn't translate to wins. Maybe it does. We'll never really know. But what you do know is that you're going to go into a season with a strong foundation built because that entire team is under one roof, right? And
Yeah,
all they can do when meetings break, we talked about it yesterday. They can only go to dinner with their teammates. They got to meet somebody new. They can only go to the golf course with their teammates, or they can only go out, with their teammates. So it really, forces them to kind of build those bonds and create that strong knit, that
yeah.
strong knit culture, which obviously we saw in 2023 was just uber important in the success that Cleveland had.
I do think um, it's I do think too, like on some level, it can't be ignored how much that came up in the locker room throughout the season. That guys felt like they really bonded over that, and that kind of allowed them to have the success they had in a season that was filled with adversity. So I don't think that should be understated. Some other things that he hit on, he did not reveal who the play caller was going to be just yet. It's only been about a month since we last heard from him when he was introducing Ken Dorsey. So no answers there. He did kind of point to some of the reasons why they liked Ken Dorsey, the fact that he has this background with a bunch of different offenses, a bunch of different quarterbacks, and some of the things that he's seen. He continued to say that they're putting their heads together to, what's the word that he uses? It's not rebuild, but basically like redo or build it back up. Build it back up is the thing he likes to say, which I kind of find interesting. It almost makes it seem like the offense was just like so bad last year that he's like, we got to start from
Start
the
from
bottom of the barrel,
zero.
just start over. Yeah, like or they
Yeah.
clean slate. But it seems like that kind of is the mentality they have with bringing in Ken Dorsey, and he and Ken Dorsey are flying out to see Deshaun. He made it very clear, not talking football. That's not, it's frowned upon at this time of the off season. But that they're going to go out and they're going to meet face to face, and Ken Dorsey will get a chance to actually interface with the guy he's going to be working with very closely.
Yeah, really, really good opportunity for them to go out and, like you said, just get face to face with obviously Deshaun Watson's new offensive coordinator, which will be
Yeah,
fantastic. But we did a show a couple weeks back, just kind of looking at what Ken Dorsey's going to bring to the table, and Kevin Stefanski referenced it at one point today. He said that something along the lines of his aggression can't be denied in terms of play calling. Right? He's Ken Dorsey's a crazy competitive guy. Obviously, we all remember the clip of him like kind of smashing his iPad and whatnot.
yeah,
But that gets shown. But what doesn't is every day in practice when you're always competing. Everything you do, I'm sure there's competitions in the on the whiteboards in the quarterback room or on the practice field, thrown at the goalposts and whatnot. So when you have that competitive mindset at all times of the day, that's something that's really important. That's something Ken Dorsey really brings to the table. So as they continue to build that, like you said, build that offense back up, it's going to be really exciting to see what that final form is going to be, because it's going to look a lot different than what we're used to with that Kevin Stefanski, Alex Van Pelt, under center run game. But I think it has the potential to be something that Cleveland
yeah.
Browns fans would get really excited about, coming next year.
Yeah, he talked a lot about playing from the shotgun and how that's evolved, and how him and Ken Dorsey are constantly trying to think through like how is the game change, or how our offense is changing and becoming more innovative, and how can we kind of be ahead of the curve. So I think it's good that they're doing all those things. It speaks to just why they made the changes they made. They feel like they got to step their game up in terms of how can we kind of evolve with the sport, and I think that stuff's important. Now the big question that we're all waiting to find out is who's going to actually be the one calling the plays.
Yeah, I would also add too, it was really cool hearing Kevin talk about AVP. I think he opened even with just
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
acknowledgement.
somebody asked him about him, just
Yeah,
why he parted ways with him and went to the
yeah,
Patriots, and
and
he had
it,
some
it
good
was
things
it
to
was
say.
cool to hear him say like, "Hey, nothing against the guy. Just sometimes in the NFL, and sometimes we've all had to make tough decisions, and sometimes in your careers or whatever it may be. But it's just a thing where they needed to freshen it up. So it was cool to hear him kind of
Yeah,
acknowledge AVP and kind of thank him a little publicly for his time in Cleveland. That was pretty neat to start.
yeah. Two other things I wanted to hit on real quick. I found this one, since we're talking about the quarterback position. I found this sort of note interesting, that in that second scrum, he was asked about how important it is to have, or how valuable it could be to have a veteran quarterback, or a quarterback with experience behind Deshaun Watson, and At no point in the question did the name Dorian Thompson Robinson come up, but he sort of spun it into a, yeah, that can matter, but it's not the most. But we're going to kind of assess that situation, and then he basically turned it into complimenting Dorian Thompson Robinson and talking about how they liked his progression throughout the season and they felt really good about it. Maybe it means nothing. It's early in the off season. We're not at free agency yet, so maybe they still go out and sign somebody. But I thought that was interesting that he sort of spun a question that was just about generically veteran backup quarterbacks, and he made it about how they feel about Dorian Thompson Robinson. You got to
Yeah.
read between the lines with Kevin Stefanski. So I was trying to do my best there. It felt like something where he's trying to tell us maybe a little bit that they feel really good about Dorian Thompson Robinson and that he maybe will start the regular season as or at least training camp
Yeah.
as the primary backup quarterback.
And truthfully, Spence, we started our conversation talking about finances and how you have, an owner willing to spend. Well, when you have contracts the way the Browns do, with your quarterback taking up a ton of your contract, your running back taking up a huge contract, like you have to be creative. And one of those spaces you got to be creative is you have to have a really cheap backup quarterback. It's truthfully unrealistic to think that, obviously we loved what Joe Flacco did last year, but he's going to command a certain dollar this year because of his success. So, if that is a high number, right, I think everyone in Cleveland would love to have him back. But if that is a high number, it's not something that the Browns can commit to. And it's year 2 for Dorian. This is a time where he was truthfully drafted to be Deshaun's backup, at least in the short term. And, he's got a great opportunity to do so. So if you are correct in reading in between the lines of Kevin Stefanski there, I think that that DTR is going to get a really good opportunity to show, that he is capable of being that backup.
Well, let's mark this moment in the video. If I'm right, I want to come back and say I called it back on February 28th or February 20th. Is it the 29th? I lost all track of days.
You nailed it. Yep, you nailed it. The
28th. Before we get out of here, the other thing I want to mention, because Kevin Stefanski gave a non-answer on the topic of his tackle situation and having 3 guys that could all start, which is, I think, a fair question. And he basically just said, it's a good problem to have, which is true. But I actually think that is one of the most fascinating conversations and situations that this team has to navigate this offseason. The Jack Conklin contract is kind of an albatross. If you move on from him, trading him or cutting him, you got to eat a pretty hefty cap number this year. And I don't know that the Browns are ready to do that this year. So I almost feel like he's going to end up being on this team. And you're just going to have to kind of navigate like who's going to be where, what you're going to do. Maybe it means DeJuan Jones gets some looks at left tackle because maybe you're not going to re-sign Jet Wills next offseason. I don't know. But I do think that honestly is one of the most fascinating position groups to watch kind of transpire and get built and sorted out this offseason.
And I would also add, too, that this draft class is widely regarded as a incredibly deep tackle class. So don't be surprised if, we've talked about, we're going to get into some more scenarios as the draft approaches, but, I wouldn't be surprised if you get into the second round and some of those guys that, maybe Andrew Berry had circled or whatnot are off the board. At what point do they start? Do they look to draft some depth at the position? Because if you look 1 year out, we talked about it yesterday, Berry's always 2, 3, 4 years out. Is Conklin going to be there? Is Jed Wills going to be there? What if you come in with a couple young studs and DeJuan Jones and a potential new guy coming in? So that position is going to be one that obviously we have circled for the short term in this upcoming season and the long term, how they're going to, kind of succession plan and really plan for down the road there.
It's important stuff. It's an important conversation that the Browns have to kind of sort through this offseason, and it's certainly one that we'll be following along with and monitoring at BrownsDigest.com throughout. So be sure to stay logged in there. I do want to remind you guys, well, I'm here one more day. I'm here through Thursday dinner time. So we'll be talking a little bit. We'll be talking with you guys again tomorrow. We'll get a first look at some of these prospects in their drills. It's going to be mostly defensive linemen and linebackers tomorrow. We won't get a chance to see the receivers and all that on Friday, unfortunately. But I will sort of report on what we're seeing and some of the guys that the Browns could be interested in, which, by the way, Anthony, I had a chance to talk to 2 of those guys that the Browns could be interested in, Braden Fisk, excuse me, and Mason Smith from LSU. Fisk is from FSU. He was initially at Western Michigan, transferred there, was part of the team this year, and then Mason Smith was at LSU. And I think it's interesting because both those guys have some high potential. Smith especially, his stock's kind of low because he had a knee injury but the fact that he was a 5-star recruit out of high school means he has like loads and loads of potential. So these are some things that we can obviously spend some more time talking about on Thursday. But two guys to certainly keep an eye on among some of the other ones that you've heard out there.
And guys that should be there, not only will they be there at 2, they could potentially be there at 3. And you talk about Fisk coming from FSU, and like you mentioned, he spent 4 years at Western Kentucky, or excuse me, Western Michigan in the MAC. So he's got that like grittiness to him. He was playing on
Yeah.
Tuesday nights at Infocision Stadium in sideways rain, man. Like he loves the game of football and got the opportunity to do it at a big school his senior year. And he's just got like all the intangibles you're looking for. He's very tall.
Yeah.
He's got long arms. He's tough as nails. Got some things you would, that he can improve on. We'll have a story coming out on him hopefully sometime this week. But like, yeah, he's a great prospect. And then you talk about Mason Smith, a guy that fits the Andrew Berry mold. Like, hey, he could be a later round guy who has a ton of potential. Downside's certainly there, but if you do hit on a guy like that, you find that diamond in the rough. That could be a guy who's got a lot in him. And could be a long-term piece, for Cleveland. So it's getting exciting, man. That's the good.
I love it. I love it. We got a regular old Anthony Kuiper here on at Browns Digest, so we're loving it. As always, guys, we appreciate you following along with our coverage from the NFL Combine. You can continue to do so by liking, subscribing, commenting via the Browns Digest YouTube channel, or many of you might be watching this video right now. And of course, be sure to keep on following along tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week over at BrownsDigest.com. Take care.